The smoke from Marcus's grill had barely begun to rise when Karen's shrill voice cut through the peaceful lakeside air like a blade. "This is illegal. I'm calling the police." But as the squad cars pulled up 8 minutes later, it wasn't Marcus who would be led away in handcuffs. The manila envelope Karen had been desperately trying to hide contained secrets that would shatter her perfect HOA kingdom forever, and the officer stepping the morning sun cast golden ripples across Lake Serenity as Marcus Williams adjusted the charcoal in his portable grill, the metal clicking softly against the grate. He'd claimed this same spot every Saturday for 3 years, a small clearing beside the public dock where families gathered to fish, swim, and escape the suffocating grip of suburban life. Today was supposed to be special. His 8-year-old daughter Lily would be joining him for the first time since the divorce, and he'd promised her the best burgers she'd ever tasted. "Daddy, can I help flip them?" Lily asked, her dark eyes sparkling with excitement as she stood on her tiptoes to peer over the grill's edge. "Of course, sweetheart. But we need to wait for them to cook a little first," Marcus began, but his words were cut short by the sharp staccato of high heels against wooden planks. "Excuse me." The voice was crisp, authoritative, and laced with barely contained fury. "Excuse me, sir." Marcus turned to see a woman in her 50s marching toward them, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a pristine white blazer despite the casual lakeside setting. Her pale blue eyes burned with indignation, and clutched in her manicured hands was a leather folder that seemed to pulse with importance. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, instinctively stepping closer to Lily. "I'm Karen Whitmore, president of the Lakeshore Vista Homeowners Association." She thrust the folder toward him like a weapon. "And what you're doing here is completely illegal." Marcus glanced around the public park, noting the other families scattered across the grass, children playing on the playground, couples walking hand in hand along the shoreline. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a public park. I have every right to wrong." Karen's voice cracked like a whip. "This entire lakefront area falls under HOA jurisdiction. Article 47, Section 12 of our community guidelines strictly prohibits open flame cooking within 200 feet of the waterline. You're in violation of Municipal Ordinance 15B, and I'm ordering you to cease this activity immediately." Lily tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy, what's happening?" Marcus knelt down to his daughter's level, his jaw clenched. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just a misunderstanding." He stood back up, fixing Karen with a steady gaze. "I checked the park regulations before coming here. There's nothing about HOA jurisdiction over public land." Karen's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Oh, you sweet, naive man. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? I've been running this community for 12 years. I know every law, every regulation, every loophole. This land may appear public, but the development rights, the environmental oversight, the recreational restrictions, all of it flows through our HOA. That's ridiculous. You don't own the lake. Don't I?" Karen's smile was predatory. "Lakeshore Vista Holdings, that's our management company, has a 99-year lease on recreational development rights for this entire shoreline. Every permit, every event, every gathering of more than 5 people requires our approval. And smoking, grilling, or any open flame activity is strictly prohibited." Marcus felt his blood pressure rising. He'd been looking forward to this day for weeks, had planned every detail to make it perfect for Lily. "Show me the documentation." "I don't have to show you anything. I'm giving you 5 minutes to pack up your illegal barbecue and leave, or I'm calling the police." "Daddy," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "Are we in trouble?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd promised his daughter a perfect day, and now this woman was turning it into a nightmare. "No, baby. We are not in trouble. Some people just think they can tell others what to do." Karen's eyes flashed. "Some people understand that rules exist for a reason. Some people care about property values, environmental protection, and community standards. But I suppose that's too much to ask from." She looked Marcus up and down dismissively. "Certain types of people. The racist undertone hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. He straightened to his full 6'2" height, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Certain types of people. I didn't stutter. Karen's mask of civility slipped completely. This is a family community. We work hard to maintain certain standards. We can't have just anyone setting up camp wherever they please, cooking God knows what, attracting the wrong element. The wrong element. Marcus's hands balled into fists. Lady, I'm a software engineer. I live in Riverside Heights, 3 miles from here. I pay more in taxes than most people make in a year. And I'm teaching my daughter to grill burgers on a Saturday morning. If that's the wrong element, then your community has bigger problems than you think. Don't you dare lecture me about community problems. Karen's voice rose to a shriek. I've spent 12 years building Lakeshore Vista into a premier residential development. Property values up 340%, crime down 67%, and a waiting list of qualified buyers that stretches 6 months. And I didn't accomplish that by letting every Tom, Dick, and Harry treat our lakefront like their personal backyard. This isn't your lakefront. Marcus shot back. This is public land. Not anymore. Karen's smile returned, cold and triumphant. As of 6 months ago, the City Council approved our expansion proposal. Lakeshore Vista now has development authority over this entire section of shoreline. We are turning it into a private marina and members-only recreational facility. Construction starts next month. Marcus stared at her, processing the implications. You're privatizing public land. I'm improving it. Protecting it. Making it somewhere decent families can actually enjoy without worrying about. She gestured vaguely at his grill, his cooler, his daughter's playground toys scattered on the grass. This kind of chaos. Chaos? Marcus's voice was incredulous. A father grilling burgers for his daughter is chaos. Unsupervised cooking, potential fire hazards, unregistered gatherings, impact on local wildlife. Karen ticked off items on her fingers. Do you have a permit for that grill? Are you certified in fire safety? Have you filed an environmental impact assessment? Of course not. Because people like you think the rules don't apply to them. Lily started to cry. The sound cut through Marcus's anger like a knife, replacing it with something colder and more dangerous. You know what? Marcus said quietly. Go ahead. Call the police. But while you're at it, maybe you should call a lawyer too. Because if you think you can steal public land and turn it into your private playground, you've got another thing coming. Karen's face flushed red. How dare you threaten me? I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you. Marcus began packing up his gear with deliberate slowness. This isn't over. Oh, it's over, Karen snapped, pulling out her phone. 911. Yes, I need to report an illegal gathering at Lake Serenity. There's a man here who's been grilling without permits, creating a public safety hazard, and now he's making threats. As Karen continued her theatrical phone call, Marcus noticed something odd. Her leather folder had fallen open when she gestured, and several documents had spilled onto the ground. Most were HOA letterhead, but one caught his eye: an envelope marked confidential with a return address from the state attorney general's office. Karen was so focused on her call that she didn't notice Marcus casually kicking the envelope toward his cooler, then scooping it up with a handful of ice. The police are on their way, Karen announced, ending her call. I suggest you leave now if you don't want to be arrested in front of your daughter. Marcus finished packing in silence, his mind racing. As he loaded the last of their gear into his truck, he leaned down to whisper to Lily. Hey, sweetheart. I need you to do something for me. Take this envelope and put it in your backpack, okay? And don't tell anyone about it. It's going to help Daddy make sure all the kids can come back and play at the lake. Lily nodded solemnly, understanding that something important was happening even if she couldn't grasp the details. As they drove away, Marcus caught sight of Karen in his rearview mirror. She was pacing frantically, searching through her papers with increasing desperation. In the distance, he could see the first police car approaching. 8 minutes later, as promised, Marcus pulled his truck into the parking lot of the Riverside Heights police station. But instead of turning himself in, he walked through the front doors with the envelope clutched in his hand and asked to speak with Detective Sarah Chen about fraud, corruption, and the illegal seizure of public land. The desk sergeant looked up from his computer. "Is this about the complaint we just received from Lake Serenity?" Marcus smiled grimly. "You could say that. But I think when Detective Chen sees what's in this envelope, she's going to realize that complaint is the least of Karen Whitmore's problems." Outside, the sound of sirens grew louder as more police cars raced toward the lake. But they weren't going to arrest a father for grilling burgers. They were responding to Detective Chen's urgent call about a multimillion-dollar. Detective Sarah Chen had seen a lot of corruption cases in her 15 years with the white-collar crime division, but the documents spread across her desk told a story that made her stomach turn. Bank records showing $2.3 million in fraudulent transfers. Forged environmental impact reports. Bribes to city councilmen disguised as consulting fees. And at the center of it all, Karen Whitmore's signature on dozens of falsified documents. "How long have you known about this?" Marcus asked, sitting across from her desk while Lily colored in the station's break room under the watchful eye of Officer Martinez. "We've been building this case for 8 months, Chen replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Karen Whitmore has been running the most sophisticated HOA fraud scheme we've ever encountered. She's been systematically bleeding dry every community she's managed, then using the money to buy influence and expand her territory." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "But the people in those communities, don't they notice their money disappearing? That's the genius of it. She raises HOA fees gradually, always with legitimate-sounding explanations. Pool maintenance, landscape upgrades, security improvements. The homeowners see their property values rising, so they don't question the costs. Meanwhile, she's funneling their money through shell companies she controls. And the city council just let her take over public land." Chen's expression darkened. 3 of the 7 council members have been receiving regular payments from Lakeshore Vista Holdings for environmental consulting. They rubber-stamped every expansion request she filed. Until 6 weeks ago, we didn't have enough evidence to prove the connections. What changed 6 weeks ago? Rebecca Martinez. Chen pulled out a photograph of a young Hispanic woman with kind eyes and a determined expression. She was Karen's assistant for 3 years. Finally grew a conscience and decided to come forward. She's been feeding us information, but we needed physical evidence to make arrests. That envelope you found, it contains the original bank routing numbers for the shell companies. Rebecca had been looking for it for months. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. If Rebecca was working with you and Karen finds out, that's why we moved up the timeline. We were planning to make arrests next month, but when Rebecca called in a panic this morning saying the evidence was missing, we knew we had to act fast. The detective's radio crackled to life. "Detective Chen, we have a situation at Lake Serenity. Multiple units responding to reports of a disturbance." Chen grabbed her radio. "What kind of disturbance?" "Unknown at this time. We have the complainant, Karen Whitmore, becoming increasingly agitated. She's demanding to search vehicles in the parking lot and making accusations about stolen property. She's making some pretty wild claims about having authority over the police department." Chen and Marcus exchanged glances. "I'll be right there," Chen said. "Marcus, I need you to stay here with Lily. This is about to get very messy." "No way. That woman threatened my daughter and tried to destroy our day because of her racist assumptions. I want to see her face when she realizes she's lost." Chen stuttered him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. But you stay in the car with Lily. This is police business now." 20 minutes later, Chen's unmarked sedan pulled into the Lake Serenity parking lot to find absolute chaos. 3 patrol cars surrounded Karen, who was standing in the middle of the lot screaming at anyone who would listen. Her perfect hair had come undone, her white blazer was wrinkled and stained with sweat, and her eyes had the wild look of someone who'd lost control of their carefully constructed world. This is theft. Grand larceny. I demand you arrest that man and search his vehicle. Karen pointed dramatically at Marcus's truck, which was still parked exactly where he'd left it. Officer Johnson, a 20-year veteran who'd dealt with his share of entitled residents, looked exhausted. For the third time, we cannot search someone's vehicle without probable cause or a warrant. And the man you're talking about isn't even here. Then where is he? Where's my property? Do you have any idea what you're dealing with? I have direct connections to the mayor's office, the city council, the state environmental commission. Actually, Ms. Whitmore, Chen interrupted. Stepping out of her car, I think we need to talk about those connections. Karen spun around, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally, fear. Detective Chen. What are you doing here? Rebecca Martinez called you in a panic this morning, didn't she? Told you some documents had gone missing from your office. Karen's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. The same documents that detailed your embezzlement scheme. The same documents that showed how you've been bribing city officials and falsifying environmental reports. The same documents that are now in police custody. This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer. Chen smiled coldly. Please do. Because in about 30 minutes, I'm going to need you to call someone to pick up your personal effects from jail. Karen's composure finally cracked completely. You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am? I've built this community from nothing. I've increased property values, decreased crime, created jobs. You've stolen $2.3 million from homeowners associations across 3 counties, Chen interrupted. You've bribed public officials, falsified government documents, and illegally seized public land. And that's just what we can prove so far. Prove? Karen's laugh was hysterical. You can't prove anything. Any documents Rebecca might have given you are inadmissible. She stole them. Employee theft. Attorney-client privilege. Rebecca was never your attorney. She was your administrative assistant. And the documents she provided were just the beginning. Chen gestured to the backup units that were arriving. We executed search warrants on your home, your office, and your bank accounts about an hour ago. We've also frozen all assets of Lakeshore Vista Holdings pending investigation. Karen staggered backward as if she'd been physically struck. You can't do that. I have contractors starting work on Monday. I have investors, board meetings, obligations. You have the right to remain silent, Chen said, pulling out her handcuffs. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. No. Karen screamed, backing away. This is all wrong. That man, she pointed at Marcus's truck. He threatened me. He stole my property. He's the criminal here. Actually, Chen said calmly, Marcus Williams is a citizen who accidentally discovered evidence of your crimes and did the right thing by bringing it to authorities. The only criminal here is you. As the handcuffs clicked shut around Karen's wrists, she looked around desperately at the crowd that had gathered. Families with children, elderly couples, teenagers, all the people she'd claimed to be protecting with her community standards and property values. Don't you understand? She pleaded with them. I made this place safe for you. I kept out the undesirable elements. I protected your investments. An elderly man in fishing gear stepped forward. Lady, I've been coming to this lake for 40 years. It was plenty safe before you showed up. And it'll be safe after you're gone. A young mother pushing a stroller nodded. My kids love playing here. The only thing that ever made me feel unsafe was you yelling at families for having fun. Karen's face crumpled as the full weight of her situation hit her. But the HOA, the community, everything I built. Everything you built was founded on theft and lies, Chen said as she guided Karen toward the patrol car. The real community, the one you were trying to destroy, will do just fine without you. As Karen was loaded into the back of the police car, Marcus got out of Chen's sedan and walked over to the detective. What happens now? Now? We spend the next few months unraveling 12 years of fraud. The homeowners who were victims of her scheme will get their money back. The public land she tried to steal will remain public. And Karen Whitmore will spend the next 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Marcus looked out at the lake, where families were already beginning to spread out blankets and set up picnic tables. And people can just use the park again. People never lost the right to use the park. They just got intimidated into thinking they had. Chen smiled. You know. What? I think you should come back next Saturday. Finish that barbecue with your daughter. Marcus grinned. I think I will. And I'll bring enough burgers for everyone. As the police cars drove away with Karen in custody, the crowd began to disperse. But instead of leaving, many of the families stayed. Someone had brought out a radio and music drifted across the water. Children ran laughing toward the playground. A group of teenagers started a pickup basketball game on the court. For the first time in months, Lake Serenity felt like a real community again. But Karen's downfall was far from over. As she sat in the back of the patrol car, she had no idea that Rebecca Martinez had been recording their phone conversations for weeks, or that the FBI had been monitoring her bank accounts, or that 3 other HOA presidents in neighboring counties had already been arrested in coordinated raids. The woman who had built her empire on fear, intimidation, and the systematic destruction of community spirit was about to discover that her victims had been organizing, planning, and preparing for this moment far longer than she'd ever imagined. The Riverside Community Center had never hosted a gathering quite like this one. Over 200 people packed into the main hall, their faces displaying a mixture of anger, vindication, and cautious hope. Representatives from 7 different homeowners associations sat in folding chairs, each clutching manila folders thick with documentation. At the front of the room, a banner read, "Victims of Whitmore Fraud, United for Justice." Marcus stood near the back with Lily, who was culling quietly while the adults talked. He'd been invited after Detective Chen mentioned his role in Karen's arrest to Rebecca Martinez, who had been organizing this coalition for months. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rebecca began, her voice carrying clearly through the room despite her obvious nervousness. 2 days ago, Karen Whitmore was arrested on federal charges of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. But her arrest is just the beginning. What we've uncovered is a network of corruption that spans 12 years and affects thousands of families. A hand shot up from the middle section. How much money are we talking about? Rebecca consulted her notes. Based on the FBI's preliminary investigation, we're looking at approximately $8.7 million in fraudulent transfers across all the communities she managed. That's not counting the interest, penalties, and legal fees. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Marcus watched as people turned to their neighbors, sharing their own stories of suspicious fee increases, delayed maintenance, and Karen's increasingly authoritarian behavior. But money isn't the only thing she stole, Rebecca continued. She systematically destroyed the sense of community in every neighborhood she touched. She weaponized homeowner associations, turning neighbors against each other, creating fear and division where there should have been cooperation. Dr. Patricia Williams, a retired professor from Meadowbrook Estates, stood up. "I've lived in my neighborhood for 30 years. Before Karen arrived, we had block parties, community gardens, kids playing in the streets. Within 2 years of her takeover, people were afraid to decorate their houses for holidays without written permission. She turned our neighborhood into a police state. Same thing happened in Sunset Ridge," called out a middle-aged man Marcus didn't recognize. "She banned children from playing in the common areas after 7 p.m. Said it was for noise control. But really she just wanted to control every aspect of our lives." Rebecca nodded grimly. The FBI has identified a pattern across all her communities. First, she'd identify the informal community leaders, the people who organized events, helped elderly neighbors, coached little league teams. Then she'd target them with harassment, fines, and legal threats until they either moved away or stopped participating in community life. Like what happened to the Johnsons, someone called out. They ran the neighborhood watch for 15 years. Karen hit them with $30,000 in fines for unauthorized security activities and forced them to sell their house. Or the Martinez family, added another voice. Their kids' birthday parties were too loud, their Christmas decorations violated The aesthetic standards, their vegetable garden was an unauthorized land use modification. They were fighting 3 different violations at once. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. This was exactly what Karen had tried to do to him at the lake: isolate him, make him feel like he was the problem, convince him that her authority was legitimate and his presence was unwelcome. Rebecca raised her hand for quiet. The good news is that the FBI has frozen all of Karen's assets, including the shell companies she used to launder the money. Every cent she stole will be returned to the affected communities. But there's something else we need to discuss. She clicked a remote, and a projection screen displayed a map of the county with red dots marking various locations. Karen didn't work alone. We've identified at least 15 other HOA management companies that were part of her network. They shared information, coordinated their tactics, and even rotated personnel to avoid detection. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "You're saying this is bigger than just Karen?" asked Dr. Williams. "Much bigger." Karen was the regional coordinator for what the FBI is calling Operation Gatekeeper, a systematic effort to privatize public spaces and turn residential communities into profit centers. They've been operating in 6 states, with documented cases in over 200 communities. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Chen: "Turn on Channel 7. Now." He quietly stepped outside and found a TV in the community center's lobby. The local news was running a breaking story with the headline: "Federal Raids Target HOA Corruption Network." Simultaneous raids in 3 states have resulted in the arrests of 18 individuals connected to what federal prosecutors are calling the largest HOA fraud scheme in U.S. history, the reporter was saying. The investigation, codenamed Operation Gatekeeper, has uncovered evidence of systematic embezzlement, bribery, and the illegal privatization of public land. The screen showed footage of FBI agents carrying boxes of documents out of an office building. Then the camera cut to a familiar figure being led away in handcuffs. Among those arrested was Harold Steinberg, former city council member and current chair of the Regional Planning Commission. Steinberg is accused of accepting over $400,000 in bribes in exchange for approving fraudulent land development projects. Marcus's blood ran cold. Harold Steinberg had been one of the main advocates for the lake privatization project. If he was corrupt, how many other public officials were involved? The reporter continued. Also arrested was Jennifer Walsh, CEO of Premium Community Management, which oversees HOA operations in over 50 residential developments. Walsh allegedly worked with convicted fraudster Karen Whitmore to systematically drain homeowner association funds while using intimidation tactics to silence community members who questioned their authority. Marcus hurried back into the meeting room just as Rebecca was addressing the same revelations. "The FBI raids are happening right now," she announced. "Karen's entire network is being dismantled. But we need to understand something: this wasn't just about money. This was about power. They were trying to reshape how we live, how we interact with our neighbors, how we use public spaces." "So what do we do now?" asked a woman from the front row. "Now we rebuild real community. Not the fake, controlled version Karen tried to create." Rebecca's voice grew stronger. "We are proposing the formation of a new organization, the Community Rights Coalition. Our mission will be to educate homeowners about their rights, provide legal support for those fighting fraudulent HOA actions, and work with local governments to prevent this kind of corruption from happening again." The room erupted in applause. Marcus found himself clapping along, feeling something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. "There's one more thing," Rebecca added when the applause died down. Karen's arrest was triggered by a chance encounter at Lake Serenity. A father was grilling burgers for his daughter when Karen tried to intimidate him into leaving. Instead of backing down, he stood up for his rights and accidentally discovered evidence that broke this case wide open. All eyes turned to Marcus, who felt his face burning with embarrassment and pride. Marcus Williams and his daughter Lily reminded us all that public spaces belong to the public, that communities are built on inclusion, not exclusion, and that sometimes the most powerful act of resistance is simply refusing to be bullied. The standing ovation was thunderous. Lily looked up from her coloring book, confused but pleased by all the attention. As the meeting wound down, people began approaching Marcus to shake his hand and share their own stories. But it was Dr. Williams who pulled him aside with the most important news. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. I've been researching property records for my neighborhood, and I found something disturbing. The land grab wasn't just about HOA fees and lake access. Karen and her network were systematically targeting communities with high minority populations, trying to force out long-term residents through harassment and financial pressure." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "You mean this was racially motivated?" "Not just racially. They were targeting anyone who didn't fit their vision of an ideal community. Young families, elderly residents, people with disabilities, anyone who might need community support or public services. They were trying to create exclusive enclaves for wealthy white families while destroying the social fabric that makes real communities work. That's ethnic cleansing. It's exactly that. And it was working. Until you refused to let them intimidate you at that lake." As Marcus drove home with Lily that evening, he realized that Karen's downfall was about more than just corruption. It was about the fundamental question of what kind of society they wanted to live in. Karen's vision had been one of control, exclusion, and artificial perfection. But the real community that was already forming in her absence was messier, more diverse, and infinitely more human. The next morning, Marcus would discover that the story had one more twist. Karen's lawyer had called Detective Chen with a desperate plea bargain offer. Karen would provide evidence against the remaining members of her network in exchange for a reduced sentence. But her information revealed something that would shake the investigation to its core. 3 sitting federal judges had been receiving payments from the HOA network, and they'd been systema. The FBI field office in downtown had been transformed into a war room. Charts covered every wall, showing connections between HOA management companies, shell corporations, and government officials across 6 states. At the center of it all sat a photograph of Karen Whitmore, now wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of her pristine white blazer. Marcus stood in the observation room, watching through one-way glass as Detective Chen and FBI agent Rodriguez questioned Karen. It had been 3 weeks since her arrest, and the investigation had exploded into something none of them could have imagined. "She's been talking for 6 hours straight," Agent Rodriguez explained to Marcus. "The plea deal requires her to provide names, dates, financial records, and documentation for every illegal transaction she was involved in. So far, she's implicated 47 people across multiple states, including 3 federal judges," Chen added grimly. Judge Patricia Hawkins from the 7th Circuit, Judge Michael Torres from the Eastern District, and Judge Robert Ashford from the Appeals Court. They've been taking payments for over 8 years. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "How is that even possible?" "It's brilliant, actually. Terrifying, but brilliant." Agent Rodriguez pulled up a diagram on his tablet. The judges never took direct payments. Instead, the HOA network would hire their spouses as consultants, or their children would get lucrative internships, or their personal investments would mysteriously outperform the market. In exchange, they'd rule in favor of privatization projects, uphold questionable HOA enforcement actions, and dismiss civil rights complaints. Through the glass, they could see Karen gesturing frantically as she spoke. Her lawyer sat beside her, looking increasingly disturbed by his client's revelations. "The scope is staggering," Chen continued. "They weren't just stealing money, they were reshaping the entire legal framework around property rights, community governance, and public land use. Every court case about HOA overreach, every zoning dispute, every civil rights complaint about discriminatory enforcement, it was all rigged." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. How many people were affected? Conservative estimate: about 300,000 families across the 6 states where they operated. But the real damage was to the concept of community itself. They turned neighbors into informants, made people afraid to express themselves, destroyed the social bonds that make democracy work. Agent Rodriguez's phone buzzed. He answered it, listened for a moment, then hung up with a grim expression. That was Washington. The Attorney General is calling a press conference in 2 hours. This is going public. What does that mean for the investigation? It means we are about to find out how deep this rabbit hole really goes. When news breaks about federal judges taking bribes, every case they've ruled on for the past 8 years becomes suspect. We are looking at thousands of court decisions that might need to be overturned. Through the glass, Karen had stopped talking and was staring at the table. Her lawyer was whispering urgently in her ear, but she seemed to have mentally checked out. She's realizing the full scope of what she's done, Chen observed. It's one thing to steal money from homeowners. It's another to discover you've been part of a conspiracy that corrupted the entire judicial system. Marcus's phone rang. It was Rebecca Martinez. Marcus, you need to get to the community center right now. Something's happening. What kind of something? Just to get here. And bring Lily if you can. She needs to see this. 20 minutes later, Marcus and Lily arrived at the community center to find the parking lot packed with cars, news vans, and crowds of people. Inside, the main hall was standing room only, with cameras from every major news network pointed at a makeshift stage. Rebecca found them near the entrance. The story broke early, she explained, her voice barely audible over the crowd noise. Someone leaked the FBI investigation to the press. Now everyone knows about the judges, the conspiracy, everything. On stage, Dr. Williams was addressing the crowd. What we are witnessing is the complete vindication of every homeowner who ever felt like the system was rigged against them. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't coincidence. It was a deliberate, systematic effort to destroy community democracy and replace it with corporate authoritarianism. The crowd roared its approval. Marcus noticed that many of the faces were new, people he hadn't seen at the previous meeting. Drawn by the media coverage and the magnitude of the revelations. But vindication isn't enough, Dr. Williams continued. We need to rebuild. Not just our communities, but the entire system that allowed this to happen. We need new laws, new oversight, new ways of ensuring that the people who are supposed to serve communities actually serve communities. A reporter from the front row raised her hand. Dr. Williams, what do you say to critics who argue that this is just the cost of maintaining property values and community standards? Dr. Williams's expression hardened. I say those critics fundamentally misunderstand what community means. A community isn't about property values. It's about people taking care of each other. It's about children being able to play in the streets without fear. It's about elderly neighbors having someone to check on them. It's about differences being seen as strengths, not threats. She gestured to the crowd. Karen Whitmore and her network tried to replace that with something cold and artificial. They wanted communities where everyone looked the same, acted the same, and never questioned authority. But that's not a community, that's a prison. Another reporter called out, what role did Marcus Williams play in exposing this conspiracy? Rebecca stepped to the microphone. Marcus Williams was just a father trying to grill burgers for his daughter. When Karen Whitmore tried to intimidate him into leaving a public park, he could have backed down. Instead, he stood up for his rights and accidentally discovered evidence that brought down the entire network. The cameras swung toward Marcus, who felt his face burning with embarrassment. Lily tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, why are all these people looking at us? Because sometimes doing the right thing turns out to be more important than you realize, Marcus whispered back. A new voice cut through the crowd noise. Actually, I think there's more to the story. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 60s walking down the center aisle. She had silver hair, wore a simple blue dress, and carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades in public service. My name is Judge Elizabeth Warren, no relation to the senator, she said with a slight smile. I'm a retired federal judge from the Ninth Circuit. And I need to tell you something that the FBI doesn't know yet. The room fell silent. Even the reporters stopped talking. 3 months ago, I was approached by representatives of the HOA network. They offered me a very lucrative consulting contract in exchange for ruling favorably on certain property rights cases. I turned them down, but I kept records of the conversation. When I saw the news about Judge Hawkins, Torres, and Ashford, I realized I had evidence of attempted judicial bribery. She held up a small recording device. recorded everything. Names, dates, specific cases they wanted me to influence, and the amounts they were willing to pay. This recording proves that the corruption extends far beyond the 3 judges who were arrested. Agent Rodriguez, who had been watching the press conference from the back of the room, immediately started making phone calls. Marcus could see his lips moving rapidly as he spoke to someone in Washington. Judge Warren continued, "But there's something else. Something that goes to the heart of what Marcus Williams did at that lake. The network wasn't just corrupting individual judges. They were trying to fundamentally alter the constitutional balance between property rights and civil rights. They wanted to create a legal framework where private organizations could exercise government-like power over citizens without any of the constitutional protections that limit government authority." "What does that mean in practical terms?" asked a reporter. "It means they were trying to create a system where HOA boards could search your property without warrants, impose fines without due process, and exclude people from communities based on race, religion, or economic status, all while being immune from civil rights lawsuits because they are private organizations." The crowd erupted in angry murmurs. Marcus felt his blood pressure rising as he thought about Karen's behavior at the lake, her assumption that she had authority over public land, her barely disguised racism. So when Marcus Williams refused to be intimidated, Judge Warren concluded, he wasn't just standing up for his right to grill burgers. He was defending the fundamental principle that in America, no one, no matter how much money or influence they have, is above the law. The applause was thunderous. But as it died down, Agent Rodriguez stepped to the microphone with an expression that silenced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've just received word from the Attorney General's office. Based on Judge Warren's evidence and Karen Whitmore's continued cooperation, federal arrest warrants have been issued for 17 additional judges, 32 government officials, and 47 corporate executives across 6 states. He paused, letting the magnitude of the announcement sink in. This is now the largest public corruption investigation in U.S. history. And it all started because one man refused to let a bully intimidate him into leaving a public park. As the 6 months later, Lake Serenity had been transformed. What was once Karen's sterile vision of controlled perfection had become a vibrant community hub. Families spread colorful blankets across the grass, children's laughter echoed across the water, and the sweet smell of barbecue smoke drifted from a dozen grills. Marcus stood at his favorite spot by the dock, flipping burgers while Lily helped other kids build an elaborate sandcastle nearby. The annual Community Freedom Festival had drawn over 500 people, all celebrating not just the downfall of Operation Gatekeeper, but the rebirth of genuine community spirit. "Hard to believe it's only been 6 months, said Dr. Williams, approaching with a plate of her famous potato salad. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Marcus replied, thinking about that first confrontation with Karen. "Any word on the final sentencing?" Dr. Williams's expression darkened. "Karen got 15 years. Federal, plus restitution. But that's not the big news. Rebecca called this morning with something that's going to blow your mind." Before she could continue, Detective Chen appeared at Marcus's elbow, her face grim despite the festive atmosphere around them. "Marcus, I need you to come with me. There's something you need to see." "Can it wait?" "Lily's having such a good time, it can't wait. And honestly, Lily should probably see this too. It concerns both of you." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in Chen's office, staring at a video monitor that showed Karen Whitmore in an orange jumpsuit, sitting across from FBI interrogators. The timestamp showed the recording was from that morning. "This is her final debriefing," Chen explained. "She's already given us everything about the judges, the officials, the corporate network. But there was one name she held back. Someone she was protecting, even after everything collapsed." On the screen, Karen looked haggard and defeated, a far cry from the imperious woman who had tried to intimidate Marcus at the lake. "Tell us about the architect," Agent Rodriguez was saying. "The person who designed Operation Gatekeeper from the beginning." Karen's hands trembled as she spoke. "I thought I was building something important. Something that would make communities better, safer, more valuable. I believed in the vision." "Whose vision?" Karen was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Senator Patricia Davidson. She's been the driving force behind everything from the beginning. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Senator Davidson was the chairwoman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, one of the most powerful people in Washington, and a leading advocate for community empowerment and property rights. Senator Davidson has been positioning herself as the champion of homeowner rights for over a decade, Chen explained. Every piece of legislation that expanded HOA authority, every court case that limited homeowner protections, every regulatory change that made it easier to privatize public land, she was behind all of it. On the screen, Karen continued her confession. The senator didn't see it as corruption. She saw it as evolution. She believed that traditional democratic governance was too messy, too inefficient. She wanted to create a new model where communities could be managed like corporations, with clear hierarchies and professional leadership. Professional leadership meaning people like you. People like me were just the test cases. The senator's ultimate vision was much bigger. She wanted to replace local government entirely with private management companies. No more city councils, no more public hearings, no more messy democracy. Just efficient, professional management that could deliver results. Marcus felt sick. She was trying to eliminate democracy. Worse than that, Chen replied. She was trying to replace it with something that looked like democracy but was actually corporate authoritarianism. Think about it, if every community was managed by a private company and those companies were all part of the same network, then a small group of people could control how millions of Americans live their daily lives. The video continued with Karen describing secret meetings at the senator's private estate, where the long-term strategy was planned. The corruption of judges wasn't just about individual cases, it was about gradually shifting the legal framework to favor private control over public governance. But here's the beautiful irony, Chen said, pausing the video. The senator's entire plan depended on intimidation and fear. She needed people to believe that resistance was futile, that they had no choice but to accept corporate control of their communities. And then Marcus came along, Dr. Williams added with a smile. Exactly. One father refusing to be intimidated at a barbecue exposed the entire network. All those years of careful planning, all that money spent on bribes and corruption, all those judges compromised, and it was brought down by someone who just wanted to grill burgers for his daughter. Marcus shook his head in amazement. What happens to the senator now? That's the million-dollar question. She's been very careful to maintain plausible deniability. Officially, she was just advocating for policies she believed would benefit communities. Proving criminal intent will be much harder. Agent Rodriguez appeared on the video screen again. Karen, we need you to be very specific. Did Senator Davidson ever explicitly order illegal activities? Not directly. She was too smart for that. But she made it clear what she expected. When I told her about communities that were resisting our management, she would say things like, sometimes people need to be educated about what's best for them, or effective leadership requires difficult choices. Did she know about the bribes to judges? Karen hesitated. She knew that our court cases were being decided favorably. She never asked how. But when I mentioned that we had friends in the judiciary, she just smiled and said that good policy creates good relationships. The video ended, and Chen turned to Marcus. The FBI is moving on Senator Davidson tomorrow morning. But there's something else. Something that directly affects you and Lily. She pulled out a thick file folder. We've been going through Karen's personal records and we found something interesting. Remember how she seemed to know exactly what legal threats to make when she confronted you at the lake? It wasn't just because she was experienced with intimidation tactics. Chen opened the folder to reveal a comprehensive dossier with Marcus's photograph, employment history, financial records, and even school records for Lily. She had been tracking you for weeks before that confrontation. You, specifically. Marcus felt cold dread in his stomach. Why me? Because you fit a profile. The network had been identifying potential troublemakers in communities they wanted to control. People with the education, resources, and temperament to resist their authority. You were flagged as a high-priority target for neutralization. Dr. Williams leaned forward. Neutralization. Not physical harm, Chen clarified quickly. But systematic harassment designed to force you to leave the area. They'd done it to dozens of families. False code violations, frivolous lawsuits, social ostracism, workplace complaints, whatever it took to make people's lives miserable enough that they'd move away. So the confrontation at the lake wasn't random. Not at all. Karen went there. Specifically to confront you. She expected you to back down, pack up, and never come back. When you didn't, she escalated to involving the police, thinking that would intimidate you into compliance. Marcus felt a surge of anger, thinking about how Karen had targeted his daughter, tried to ruin what should have been a perfect day together. She used Lily as a weapon against me. She tried to. But instead of breaking you down, it strengthened your resolve. And that single act of defiance brought down a conspiracy that spanned 6 states and reached the highest levels of government. A knock on the door interrupted them. Agent Rodriguez entered with a grim smile. Senator Davidson has been arrested. The charges include conspiracy, racketeering, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Her press conference is in an hour, claiming she's been persecuted for fighting government overreach. Will the charges stick? Dr. Williams asked. With Karen's testimony, Judge Warren's recordings, and the paper trail we've uncovered, she's looking at 20 years minimum. More importantly, every piece of legislation she sponsored, every judge she's recommended, every policy she's advocated, all of it is now under federal review. Chen turned to Marcus. There's one more thing. The Community Rights Coalition has been asked to testify before Congress about legislative reforms to prevent this kind of corruption in the future. They want you to be the lead witness. Me? I'm not a lawyer or a policy expert. I'm just a software engineer who wanted to have a barbecue with his daughter. Exactly. You're living proof that ordinary citizens can stand up to corruption and win. You're the person who refused to be intimidated, and your courage inspired hundreds of others to come forward. Marcus looked out the window toward Lake Serenity, where families were still enjoying the festival. Children were playing on equipment that Karen had tried to restrict, elderly couples were fishing from docks she'd tried to privatize, and teenagers were playing music she'd tried to ban. You know what the best part is, he said finally. Karen thought she was protecting community values by excluding people. But real community values, the ones she was trying to destroy, are what brought her down. People taking care of each